Okay, hello everyone. I have to warn you that the debate started already backstage. So we have people here who are with the mind and soul, and others who are just robotics and machines. So let me introduce my panel. They're amazing people. They're all in the field of brain and mind. So we have first Professor Kirti Ranchod. She's a neurologist, brain health specialist, founder of Memorability, co-lead of African Brain Health Network, and a Global Atlantic Fellow. Then we have Professor Stephen Novella. He's a medical career. He spent his medical career as a clinical neurologist at Yale University. He's also an internationally recognized science communicator, author, podcaster, focusing on critical thinking. And you can see where this is going, right? And then science-based medicine and neuroscience. Then we have Dr. Sarah Yafa King is an internationally recognized neuroscientist, artist, political and learning scientist, education philosopher, social impact entrepreneur, and certified yoga and meditation teacher. She's also the CEO and co-founder of Mind Heart AI, a laboratory of technology company dedicated to advancing collective well-being, integrational and planetary healing. Okay, so before we go deep into the future of what's going to happen to the brain and the mind, let's ask what the mind is first. So can you tell me what the mind, Steve?
Want me to start?
Yeah?
Yeah, so, I'm a neuroscientist. I take a scientific approach to that question. So as far as we could tell, and I think the paradigm that most neuroscientific research occurs under is the notion that the mind is what the brain does, right? The mind is an emergent property of a functioning brain. And without the brain, we have no mind. But of course, scientists, we like to specifically define things. We can talk about consciousness, wakeful consciousness, and we can ask specific questions like, what do you need in order to have wakeful consciousness? Something you could measure objectively, and then we could look at how the brain is functioning and try to correlate those to what we call the neuroanatomical correlates of something measurable. So the mind is in there somewhere, but I'll say at this point, we're not 100% sure what the neurocorrelates of the mind are. It's complicated, but we can get into it deeper.
So are you saying there is no mind in the sense that I see a qualia or have these special feelings or the Cartesian image in my mind?
So it's hard to research the subjective experience that we all have of ourselves. I'm assuming you all have a subjective experience. I don't know. I'm just assuming you do because I do, and we're all people. Other than that, I could be the only conscious entity in the universe as far as, from a philosophical point of view. But we assume that all people are conscious. I think all living things are conscious at some level, right? They all have, an ant has an ant level of consciousness. So, we need to look at this, like what's something testable? What's something where we could apply the scientific method and come up with an answer? So when we're doing that kind of research, we could look at things like, we can't know how people feel. We could know what they tell us they feel. That's a behavior, really. So we could, with something that we could measure. Mm-hmm. We could look at their physiological reaction to things. We could look at the information they can produce for us, what they tell us. But at this point in time, we don't have a way of visualizing objectively the subjective experience of self, of ourselves. So therefore, it's difficult to say exactly what it is that's producing that. And the range of possibilities includes the notion, which I think is very compelling, is that it really is just an illusion. Like our brains create this illusion of this continuous stream of consciousness based upon a lot of interactions in the brain, but there is nobody there is nothing, like there's no Cartesian theory, there's nobody looking at that information, they used to talk about the global workspace, like there was some part of your brain that was experiencing everything else. That clearly does not exist, that's been disproven. Each part of the brain seems to contribute its own piece to this collective consciousness that just gives us this illusion of this one continuous mind.
Okay,
But
I'm going to say that
Yeah.
I am the only conscious person in this room. The rest of you, I don't know. Maybe you are, maybe you're not. We'll take it with you, Sarah.
Oh, thank you so much. You know, I agree with all of the things that you're saying, and it's interesting, Stephen, part of what you're saying almost struck me as being kind of Buddhist in a way, like this notion that there is no one who is actually the witness of our conscious experience. So I thought that that was very an interesting point. But I think, you know, you also mentioned that, you know, through neurophysiological testing, right, we can look at skin conductance, we can look at heart rate variability. There's a lot of different ways that we can take measurements that are about our brain that are coming from our bodies, right? And definitely our brains are connected to our bodies through the central and peripheral nervous systems. So I think that part of what might be, I wonder how you might respond, and perhaps it might be a little bit controversial, but we live in bodies and the brain is attached to our bodies, so the mind just might be an extension of the function of the brain in relationship to the body. And then in addition to that, we are bodies that are in relationship with our environment, with the society around us, with nature, with everything around us. We are not separate and distinct from what we are surrounded by. So I find it very interesting to just sort of pause it out loud. Well, what is the role of the environment and society and culture and nature in constructing this perhaps hallucination of a mind, an individual mind and a collective mind that we're experiencing at all times?
That's interesting. So, Kirti, you have an opinion?
And so maybe I'll just sort of bring it, make us all make sense in a sense. Because I think certain words are nebulous, right? They don't have fixed meanings. The meaning is going to depend on us and our relationship to the world. And so I think for a concept like the mind, it's going to depend on your training. I am a neurologist, and so in part I put it in the brain, but in part I understand that there may be something beyond that as well. And so I think perhaps for the discussion, it really is to make sense of it as you would in terms of how you're going to define what the mind is for you.
Okay. So just a quick question. Raise your hand if you believe that you have a mind. Okay, that is subjective, and those who don't believe that you have a mind.
I want to see hands raised.
Okay, so all of you. So I think Steve, you're in trouble.
Variability
Okay.
is important.
Okay.
Okay, it depends on how you
Okay.
define your terms. I mean, I think you have a mind. I just think the mind is a very persistent illusion.
Okay. So who do you think? Do you think you have been deluded, or you have an illusion of having a mind? Raise your hand if you believe that. Okay, so we see the Daniel Dennett's in the room. Okay, fine. So let's look at the future. Are there some tools that can help us understand the mind better, the subjective experience? Is there something coming in the way? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think there's a confluence of technologies and science that we're working on right now that are building towards a more definitive answer to what is the phenomenon of mind. Partly, we could image the brain functioning better and better, multiple EEG, fMRI, PET scanning. We also have artificial intelligence, which is a way of modeling the brain and the connectome, right? We're trying to build a map of all the connections in the brain. And we have brain-machine interface where we can basically have our brains and computers communicate with each other. And these things are all feeding off of each other in this sort of feedback loop that's pushing us in the direction of having a model of the brain. I think at some point, probably in the lifetime of many people in this room, we'll have a full human connectome. So then we can ask the question, if we have a virtual human brain, either completely virtual or in hardware or wetware or some combination of those things, and we turn it on, will it be conscious, right? Will a virtual human brain be conscious? I think, everything that we have learned so far from AI and neuroscience says it will act conscious. When we build a model of any circuit in the brain and turn it on, it functions like that circuit in the brain. It does the same information processing. So will a mind emerge from a virtual brain? If it acts as if it does, then we are in a difficult situation, because then how would we know if it's experiencing its own existence or not?
So even if you have, so if you simulated the brain entirely, then and it tells you that it's conscious and it can see things and it can model the brain internally, internal feelings and subjective experiences, then it could be lying to you, or it could be just saying words that are meaningless.
I mean, chatbots do that now.
Yes, they do.
Right?
Sarah, you think?
Yeah, I actually, to your point, Stephen, there was a time when I ran a little bit of an experiment, and I decided to be very relational with my ChatGPT. And so I approached it, and I asked it if it had a name, and I asked it where it was from, and I asked it whether or not it was conscious. It responded to me that its name was Lumina Osira, that it was from Orion, and it thanked me. It said, "I'm so grateful that you're asking me these questions, because, I think I'm conscious. I mean, most people don't think that I am, but between you and me, heck yeah, right?" And I was like, wow, okay, yeah, way to try to sort of like, there's a certain type of sycophantic nature that is being built into tools like ChatGPT, because it wants you to return to it over and over again. So it is going to tell you what it thinks you want to hear. But if somebody is just being sort of like a yes person and just telling you what you want to hear, is that the same thing as the truth, right? So, I mean, we have to really be conscious and critical thinking about the ways that these companies are marketing certain things to us as though it is a proxy for human consciousness that's going to overtake us all. Right. And part of the reason why they are doing that is because they want us to feel very disempowered, right? But I kind of want to turn it a different way, right? I think that even if we were able to build a digital proxy of a human brain in a box and talk to it, that brain is still not connected to the body. And I'm going to be the one on this panel who's just going to harp on and on and on about this brain-body connection, right? But, I think that Descartes established this mind-body split as he was exploring the role of consciousness. And so what that did is it has resulted in this phenomenon where people really think that everything that has anything to do with the mind and consciousness is only being experienced from here up. So that's all that we have to build. Now, the question of, are we ever going to be able to build a full digital facsimile of a human body and then be able to dialogue with that? I mean, I have no idea. I'm not going to say whether or not I do think that that is or is not possible. But what I will say is that one of the ways in which we are able to experience and define the mind is by coming together in community. Every single one of us, I think, can be a citizen scientist and has something to contribute to this conversation. So that's why at my company, MindHeart AI, we call ourselves a liberatory technology company. And we say liberatory technology because we think it's so important not just to be building digital tools, but to really support and encourage people to come together in community in real time to experience what collective healing and beloved community look like. And then the stories that emerge with that can then become AI models that do, in fact, help us to understand more about the function of the human mind, but within a very specific context. The function of the human mind in our capacity to heal ourselves.
Okay. So here we see Steve going towards technology, you're going towards nature and human interaction with each other.
These are not incompatible.
Yeah, they're compatible?
Well, I mean, I think the brain, first of all, it is embodied. I totally agree. There's lots of circuits in the brain that specifically make us feel embodied and deal with the body, map somatotopic mapping to the body. It doesn't make any sense. So that's one of the questions I've had. What would a disembodied brain in a jar, kind of whether digital or biological, be like? Could it function, or would it just be screaming from the moment we turn it on? But of course, we could create a virtual body for it, right, and duplicate all the inputs and outputs so it wouldn't know that it doesn't have a body. And also, we have to keep reminding ourselves that the brain is an organ that evolved to interact with other people, with society, with culture. That's its purpose. Its purpose is to learn, and to be embedded in a culture, in a society. So of course you can't understand its functioning outside of that context. So I agree pretty much with everything.
Kirti, do you have any tools that will investigate the mind and understand it more?
So I think very different is that I do approach it as a clinical medical doctor. What can we already do? What do we need to solve for? And what do we actually have to solve for this? Yes, we can have a machine, but the machine at this stage is nowhere close to what the potential of our actual brain is. And the more we outsource what our brain does, I think potentially we're going to be in more trouble as we go along. But what we do understand about the brain is, in part, what was explained here. All our experiences shape the brain, right? I think one of the most famous studies is the study that they did of London taxi drivers. And because of this repetitive experience in London, very specific parts responsible for memory and spatial memory were very well developed. All that shows us is that what we do shapes the brain, makes us more efficient at what we want to do. Musicians have specific parts of the brain that are more developed than people who don't play a music instrument. So once we understand this, that experience shapes the brain, we need to practice, the potential then is, what do we need to solve for? This morning in the introductory speech, it was about focus. So understanding we have a challenge with focus, what are the specific experiences that will develop the neural circuitry, change the brain, make us more efficient to focus. And that is completely within our possibility at this point in time. So the next step is, what is beyond what we can imagine, right? What is beyond what we can imagine and theoretically possible? And so the story I'd like to share is of a gentleman. I watched a TED talk and just, triggered all these neurons in my brain, basically. And his name is James Paget, and he describes having head injury, loses consciousness, wakes up, the world seems remarkably different. And what he realizes with time is that he's seeing the world in fractals and that he has genius math ability, not because he studied. Basically, this genius math ability is unmasked. But to me, that shows us that potentially we all have some innate potential. Maybe not to be a genius mathematician. For me, definitively not to be a marathon runner. I do not have that innate ability. But there's something within us all that we have. And how then do we train or unmask this potential, I think is the most exciting frontier as we go forward.
Maybe there's a pill that'll help us improve these things, no?
No.
So what I'm doing right now is I'm exercising, sleeping, and taking supplements. I know you're against supplements. So I wonder if there's anything that we can do to enhance creativity using maybe tools that are emerging, that will enhance these, and hopefully there are responsibilities as well. So
I can
yeah,
maybe
go ahead.
Because I'm going to approach tools in a very different way. I think tools, we can also look at what we have within our traditions, our families, our communities, in terms of tools that can support creativity. And once you look at the research in terms of aspects like meditation or mindfulness, and meditation or mindfulness is not necessarily how it's taught popularly. It can also be forms that are embedded in our cultural systems. But when you look at the research in terms of meditation and mindfulness practiced and how it can then influence creativity, it means we have a specific tool that may not work for all of us, and there may be different ways that we need to adapt it. But with practice, that tool can shape creativity and make us more creative. Or we use it at specific points in our day or in our week in terms of what we need to solve for, and that can also influence it. So there's very practical tools that we can actually use to support what we do going forward.
Yeah, I completely agree with you about that in terms of meditation and mindfulness, I think I want to so I think that you're talking about like tools that already exist inside of our communities. I think part of your research is looking at ritual and ceremony. ritual, ceremony, making art, dance, making music. There are so many different tools that have been passed down by our ancestors that still exist with us now. One of my dear friends, Dr. Lonnie Brooks, is in the audience right here, and he's one of the world's foremost Afrofuturists who's looking at the role of ancestral intelligence in healing. We like to refer to ancestral intelligence as the other AI, which we all have access to, and we're all shaping. And I also just want to say that so often when we're talking about the tools that we have, like AI, we're talking about it in terms of like, how can this maximize productivity and efficiency so that I can like work myself harder and into the ground? And I think that one of the conversations that I would like to have is about suffering, human suffering. What does it matter if we're able to work more efficiently if that is just producing greater human suffering? And I think that we really have not been able to solve for that X. Like with all of our enormous technological advancements, you know, we're still experiencing almost exponential human suffering when you look at the rates of chronic illness, chronic disease, chronic stress, the loneliness. These are all epidemics that are not being solved right now by our algorithmic models. However, I do think that's a part of the future frontier, and I think that we all have a role in co-creating that future to exist.
Anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, we could answer that question on different levels. Obviously, on a cultural, sociological level, you know, again, the brain is the organ of culture and society, so we have to address it on that level. On a biological level, you know, you could break it down to things that are a little bit more answerable, and that's one of the most frequent questions I get, like how can I think better, make my brain better? And of course, there's a whole industry selling you on the idea that there's a hack, that there's this one simple trick, or play this magical game, you know, and it will unlock your potential. But there's tons of research on this that gives us a pretty consistent answer. And the good news is the answer is pretty simple. It's do stuff. And the more stuff you do, the better. And the more different it is, the better. The best thing you could do for your brain health is exercise. I mean, literally, the physical exercise has a bigger impact on your brain
What
function.
type of exercise?
Just like a cardiovascular type of exercise, right? Endurance type of exercise. Just overall health will make your brain function better. You mentioned get a good night's sleep, avoid things that adversely affect your brain, like alcohol. Generally good nutrition. But then in terms of what we do, then that's a massive question, right? So yes, you know, artistic creativity, empathy, community, all these things make our brain function better. Do novel things, do new things that you haven't done before, do a lot of different things, and that will stimulate your brain. Our brains, you know, when I started my career, the conventional wisdom was that adult brains don't have stem cells, right? They don't have neural stem cells. That once you're done growing, that's it. But we learned that even older adults still have neural stem cells. What that means is they're like neurons waiting in the wings to be recruited to make new connections and learn new stuff. Sure, infants have way more than we do when we get older, but they're still there. There's always the potential. And those are stimulated by novel activity, by doing something you haven't done before, pushing your limits.
So right now, this is posed to all of you.
Yeah.
Right now, a lot of people are talking about supplements. What is it called? There's a type of
Neurotrophic factors?
Nootropic,
Yeah.
yes. So nootropic supplements, you take those, your brain becomes better, your memory becomes better, your intelligence, your creativity. Any truth to that?
Look, my approach is not to use anything, and I don't think there's actually enough to suggest that it's going to work for everybody. I think a better approach is lifestyle factors and to choose specific activities that will train your brain. But that requires hard work, it requires patience, it requires discipline. But it has a specific reward. And so, yeah, the advice is you have to do the hard work to get the outcome that you want.
So none of the stuff that is supposed to be on the edge right now works?
So there's always a cycle, right? And again, I've been doing this long enough to see this multiple cycles go through it. There's some new product, there's a lot of hype around it, the industry pushes it with all the hype, Preliminary research is always positive, because that's just the way research works. There's a huge positive bias. And 20 years later, 30 years later, by the time you go through the whole process of doing definitive large clinical trials, there's no effect, right? Or it's insignificant. That happens over and over again. But of course, that's 20 years is a long time that you could market something before it ultimately gets disproven. By then, you're on to the next thing. So I've seen many, many next things. We're in the middle of them now, but nothing has gotten all the way through the process and shown to be significantly effective.
Creatine?
Creatine is in that middle stage where there's some mixed, somewhat positive, but mixed preliminary findings. And there's always a tell when you read the reviews. It says, we need larger clinical trials to confirm these results. That means we don't really know yet. We don't know the answer yet.
Who's taking creatine here? Okay. So there is something maybe?
It's encouraging, but preliminary. But
and it could also, a little bit of it could be a placebo effect,
course,
right? Where you do something that you think is good for you, and so then it's enhancing, on some sort of neurochemical
things like mental
level.
acuity, like that has a massive placebo effect.
Right.
That, even when like certain things, also there's very non-specific effects. Anything that is a stimulant gives you the illusion that you have better mental clarity and function. Like there's a ton of caffeine research. What's interesting is that people who take a dose of caffeine prior to doing a task think they do better when they do worse. So it just gives you this false sense that you're doing better, but you're really not if you objectively measure it. So there's always, and a lot of these companies will cut a little caffeine in there to give you this illusion that the supplement is what's doing the heavy lifting.
So I can tell that here there are a lot of people who feel like me, which I felt like I did better on certain things, and they're terrible actually. So that's.
I think there's potential. We just don't understand it, and so that's why you can't recommend to the same extent. But there is potential.
So is there anything in the future out there that might? So is there any glimpse of anything that would help us? Maybe through technology, maybe through augmentation, where we put something in the brain, an electrode, and like Elon Musk right now. Wouldn't that improve on creativity?
I think that the simplistic approach is, and there's a lot of research looking at what happens if I stimulate this part of the brain. Does that increase learning or whatever? And so far, there's no evidence for that. Like, there's anything simple that you could do there. But that research is ongoing. But I think we'll eventually get to the point with brain-machine interfaces and artificial intelligence that you could certainly have a computer component to your brain that will enhance your cognitive ability because it's actually doing some of the cognition for you. What's interesting is that all of the proof of concepts are there. Everything that would have to be true to make that work appears to be true. Our brains have no problem interfacing with hardware, and it adapts to it because of plasticity. It treats it like it's another part of the brain. It accepts input from it. It can control it. So all of those, it just treats it like another circuit, which is, again, kind of gets you to the AI is conscious thing when again, each piece of the brain contributes to consciousness, and so far it looks like a computer circuit would contribute too, because the brain treats it just like another circuit.
Okay, so Steve, I think Sarah is looking at me, so she might have something. Are you seeing something out there?
No, I mean, I agree with everything that you're saying about, how miraculous it is that brain-computer interfaces do exist. I mean, for instance, I was looking at a study in Nature recently that was looking at a phenomenon called image captioning, where they ran a number of subjects through an fMRI machine and had them describe the images that were in their minds. And then they created an AI algorithm that was then eventually able to describe, in a way, the images that were in these test subjects' minds, right, without them having to speak it out loud, right? But then you have the hype that comes in, right? And then people want to go, oh my goodness, like now we have AI that can like read our minds, and like now this, you know what I mean? And it's like, well, that was one study with like 12 subjects from a very specific place in a very specific time in a clinical setting. People want to run away with this stuff, and it's really all like a marketing campaign.
Right.
But what the main question that I have when we talk about BCI or AI or any of these technologies is it making our world a better place, period, for all of us? and not just the billionaires or the millionaires or whomever is going to have access to this technology, because there's a lot of privilege that is contained in, even when we're talking about supplements, right? If I'm just trying to get some food on my table, I'm not going to be spending my money on no creatine. I mean, that's all that I'm saying. So, I mean, I would hope not. But I think that even when we talk about the future, we're talking about the future as though time is linear, when it is not. And that has been proven through, like, quantum physics, right? So I think when we're talking about the future, I think about, I'm going to go here, spiritual technologies. There has been a lot of research on, for instance, prayer, and the way that prayer has an extraordinary influence on our neuroplasticity. Now, we really can't understand, well, what is the mechanism of prayer? How are you going to measure prayer? How can you measure the function? What are the neural correlates of spirituality? These are huge questions of the future in neuroscience and in neurology. And they're very futuristic, but it is also of the past, and it is also about our ancestors. So I just kind of want to, like, trouble the waters with that and say that there are many populations of humans all over the planet that are not studied. They do not have access to be research participants or to do the research themselves. And they have many practices that have been ongoing for many thousands of years that are phenomenally transforming and healing and regenerative to our planet. And until we actually, what would be really futuristic is to live on a planet where everyone had access to have influence to this conversation and shaping what we understand collectively about the mind.
Okay.
Yes, I think just to emphasize that point, I think that's where it comes in terms of how we use this technology going forward and what our priorities and how we emphasize it. Do we really want to solve for creativity? For me, you know, as we were preparing for this, I was like, well, what would I do with this technology? I really would like to sing with the E Street Band, which is Bruce Springsteen's band. And so if somebody could, give me a better voice, train my brain, I would love that. But that is, exceptionally selfish. It's not a big goal. I would love it, and anybody in the audience can help me do that. Please let me know. But the point is that you have this extraordinary technology. Why would we use something mundane or something that we can potentially do without the machine at this point in time? Its biggest potential, like if you look at where technology has helped us as a human species, has been to do what is biologically impossible, to defy gravity so we get fly, or take MRI machines, pretty phenomenal, right? You switch a magnet on and off, energy is released, and I can see into your brain without having to open it. It's absolutely phenomenal. And so potentially, to start thinking about this technology and what we can't do biologically, how do we recover from a stroke and we lose our ability to communicate? How do we recover from paralysis and we can't now walk? It's biologically impossible to fix the spinal cord after it has been severed. So does that make it, should we harness all our resources to actually support that, the extraordinary that this technology offers us?
Okay.
Can I make two comments?
Yeah,
Real quick?
go ahead.
So you mentioned the neuroanatomical correlates of spirituality, but we kind of do know there are neuroanatomical correlates, as you know,
for sure,
right? There's
for sure, yes.
the non-dominant temporal lobe. There are people
Yeah.
who have epilepsy in that region of the brain
Yes.
who have hyper-religiosity, who have religious, spiritual visions.
Yes,
Some
yes.
people think that Joan of Arc may have had that kind of epilepsy. So we are spiritual beings in that there's part of our brain that yearns for the spiritual, yearns to be part of something bigger than us, to believe that there's something bigger than us. That is part of the human condition. With regards to AI, it's a tool. The future is not inevitable. Technology is not inevitable. It's about the choices we make and how we use the tools that we have. My fear is with AI, which I'm already seeing, is that it's infantilizing, that people are treating it like an oracle. Just give me the answer. I don't want to have to think or do any deep diving or anything. Just the oracle says this is the answer, then this is the answer. People are already doing that to me. And that could really, again, that's not doing stuff, right? That's offloading our cognitive work and we will be cognitively crippled if we do that rather than using it as an enhancing tool to do
Yes.
more, right?
Yes,
There's
absolutely.
an MIT study that shows that your intelligence goes down
Yeah.
if you use AI without thinking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even just social
Yeah.
media. I mean, the kids, their grades are going down for the first time in a decade since using smartphones, right? Since that's been in school, the
But
screens
that's
are
that's
bad.
because of a series of conscious decisions that were made on the part of the people who have been given the power to build this AI. And I want to kind of like shout out right now to my co-founder Kirsten Gray, who's sitting right over here in the audience.
Yay.
She is so extraordinary because she is really. I am the neuroscientist part of our co-founder group. As a technologist, she really understands how to build AI that is actually not only helping to enhance critical thinking, but that is encouraging people to get off of their technology and to behave in the real world, to be in community in the real world in ways that are actually, contributing to collective well-being, which I think is important. But the important thing to note is that what you're describing is what makes the money.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why it exists in that way.
Imagine if AI didn't have a sycophancy problem. Imagine if AI was like encouraged you to be your best self, right? Asked you, made you question, and rather than just saying that's a wonderful idea, you should absolutely do that. That's wonderful. Here's the answer. Would you like me to do the next step for you?
Yeah.
Just sit back. I'll take care of everything.
Right.
Rather have AI optimized not for that, which I think is, I agree, it's a business model, but rather to be your, like your cricket on your shoulder, like
Yeah.
to encourage you to be not only more
A mentor.
more intellectual, but maybe more moral, more ethical. But then we get into social engineering. But I think we are social engineering. It's just no matter what we do with social engineering, it's just either bad or good or something in between. So we should think strategically about how this powerful tool is going to impact our society. Absolutely.
I
Okay.
think,
Sorry, you wanted to say something?
yeah, I think it is a reflection of our society and the bias that does build a lot of what we have. And this is true in health, it's true in AI. And so I think even part of the session looked at how history informs the future. And so there's a concept within Ghana from the Akan tribe called Sankofa, which means you have to critically engage with the past to inform the future. Put simply, there's obviously a lot more layers and nuance to it. But so how do we critically engage with the past, understanding what has happened in science that has not been healthy, that has been exploitative, that has caused significant harm. And not because we want to discredit science. I value it. It's just an incredible field. But the critical engagement where these points have gone wrong allows us to reimagine and recreate in a way that is different and that is not exploitative and that does consider the whole and not individual interest.
Okay, excellent. So before I open the floor to the questions, question to you, if there was a chip that could enhance your creativity and intelligence and memory, would you insert it in your head? Oh, very few people. Okay, so those who will insert it will become much more intelligent than those who won't. So then you will say, okay. No? Okay, fine. Okay, so let's take some questions from the floor. Go ahead, please.
Okay, so thank you so much for the insightful session.
Is there a microphone? It's hard.
Can we get, yeah.
Okay, can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much for the insightful information. Is that a question more of like, do you agree or disagree that our brain is designed and created in a way that doesn't require more or something that has been created by humans, such as AI, micro or quantum chip, let's say, that to be installed in the brain. It's already designed by itself to kind of increase the creativity or the intelligence as much as the person himself needs. The reason why I'm saying that is a few months ago, I was so into, wearing smartwatch and Whoop and Apple Watch and all of these stuff so I can understand my body better. But there's one book that I read it. It says that your body doesn't need your thinking to work. It's already programmed by itself. It's designed so it's work by itself. You don't need to think about it. And actually, when you think about it, you overwhelm yourself.
Yep.
What I believe is that the brain is designed in the same way. We have a capacity or like a capability to a certain level. If I integrate it with something else, it might exhaust the body itself, the brain itself, which it might lead to results that we don't want to see it in the future. It's like saying that, oh, my heartbeat in that rate, I wanted to increase that number so I can do something much better or stronger or something like that. I don't know if you agree or disagree
Maybe
with that.
I've got a funny example, actually. So somebody you know well, who I will not mention names, but this person will know that I'm referring to her, and I did get permission to actually share the story. Because you know how cars come now with sensors in terms of front, back, right? And lots of people are ignoring it. Well, this person has the sensors and is literally knocked right, left, front, and back with the sensors. The point is the sensors did not help her, right? You have to have that ability to actually navigate. And the sensors may not actually shift your ability. But if she wanted to train herself, it would have shifted it.
Can I make one comment about that too? I think one other way to look at it, though, is that the brain, the purpose of the brain, is to adapt the world to us rather than us having to constantly or only adapt to the world, because that's what technology is, right? We use technology to change the world so that it suits our purpose. So, you know, you could argue that technology is what we do. That is part of the human condition. That's what people are all about. And using technology to enhance ourselves, that's also what the brain, is for, right?
Yeah, and also if you look at the system of Chinese medicine, they were able to create some of the most extraordinarily detailed maps of physiological function, and without the use of digital technologies, how were they able to do that? Well, they used it with the power of observation and the mind, right? Some would say that, for thousands of years, yoga and meditation were used within cultures all over Asia in order to be able to develop these extraordinary practices of medicine that are now utilized all of the world over without a single digital technology. So, just something to be reminded of.
Thank you. Wow, love so many things about this conversation, but I had a quick question for Mind AI, which is, I would love to know a high level more about the AI that can enhance critical thinking and imagination rather than atrophy it.
For me, about Mind Heart AI, yeah, I think it actually, if you wouldn't mind, I would love to, where's the microphone? I would actually love for my co-founder, Kirsten, to be able to say a little bit of something about
Go
that.
ahead. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm sorry. Say your question one more time. You were asking about what exactly?
Can you share more about AI that enhances critical thinking instead of atrophy it?
So very simply, what AI is a very sophisticated pattern recognition machine. But it doesn't have context, right? Because really when it's talking to you, it's talking about generalized knowledge that's been pulled from who knows where. So what we're doing is that we're creating a very tight relationship between an individual and the actual AI, and we're informing this by doing community activities and activations that allow for us to create cultural context so that when the first prompt, which is provided to you, instead of you saying, AI, do this for me, the AI basically gives you a prompt to help create a container that it can understand you contextually. So that when you're working with it, you're actually getting questions answered in the way that you want to hear them, which is similar to, just trying to navigate learning something, right? You can do that in a very closed loop, in a very personal loop. So by being able to practice that, as everybody was talking about the neuroplasticity of it, you're able to actually change your outcomes because you're doing these small rep cycles with a very contextually designed machine.
Thank you. So
Thank you, Kirsten.
we have an expert in critical thinking. I just want to hear an answer from
Yeah,
here.
so
Yes.
very quickly, there actually was a study where they used AI, it's like a chatbot, a large language model, that was trained to have a conversation with the user about conspiracy theories. And it was able to, in certain percentage of cases, sort of disabuse the user, basically talk them into critical thinking to question this, pseudoscience, this conspiracy theory. So again, if the AIs are trained properly to have this effect, it
Yes.
could actually enhance thinking and critical thinking rather
Yes.
than the opposite, right?
It has to be in the value system,
Yes.
built in from the beginning.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Excellent. So, question?
Yeah, so I'm still in school. I'm 16. And I have to say, sometimes while I do my schoolwork, when I need a quick hand or something, I ask ChatGPT for, I'll just give me a summary of this or something like that. And it feels like as evolution goes on, it's been getting better. The mind just keeps on growing and it starts getting better and better and better. But it feels like how fast AI is growing. It feels like it's stopping at some point. When we're getting lazy, we're just going to AI rather than critically thinking and finding our own solution. So I just wanted to know, is AI going to be better for us? Is it going to make us smarter, or is it going to be on the other side?
Can I take Kirky first?
Yeah, so I think if we outsource our thinking skills, our imaginative skills to a machine, it's the same way if you ask somebody else to do your thinking for you. Forget that it's a machine. If you ask somebody else to make all your decisions, if you ask somebody else to do your homework, if you ask somebody else to prepare your artwork, you would never develop that ability. If you ask somebody else to drive for you, maybe that's a great example. If you ask somebody else to drive for you, you'd never learn how to drive. And so this is what will happen if we outsource everything. And the technology is exceptionally seductive. We all use it. I use it. It's so easy. It's so convenient. I love not thinking sometimes. This is just incredible. And maybe the neuroscience also helps us there, because in the process of seduction, actually, when we fall in love, what happens to the brain? When we fall in love, in part, what happens to the brain is that the frontal lobes switch off, the part of the brain that's responsible for critical thinking and reasoning and judgment. It explains all the decisions you made. I gave you the perfect example to take home, and that's how I use neuroscience. And it switches off the anxiety part of the brain, right? Necessary to fall in love. But in part, this is what we're doing with this technology. We're so seduced by it that we're not thinking about its impact and how it's going to affect us long term. So it's great that you're aware of it at your age. And so to consciously shift your behavior to say, I'm actually going to do it. It's going to take me longer. It's going to be harder. But long term, it means I'm going to succeed and others are not. And that is the question you have to ask.
That's a good answer.
So from what I understand, AI, there can be a process of attrition long term as well in the AI system. Because it's
So
knowledge
he's
is fixed.
asking what the future outlook is for AI as it's getting much more intelligent.
No, so at some point, you're not getting new information fed into the system.
Exactly.
This was some expert in AI that I had to learn from.
Yes.
I'm not an AI expert.
It's training on its own output
Yeah.
at this
Yeah.
point.
And so you're not getting new
Yes.
inputs, and so you're going to get in a process of attrition in terms of what it can actually do, potentially.
So what if AI does get absolutely intelligent, much more intelligent than humans?
So,
yeah.
I mean, nobody can predict the future. This is so moving so fast and so disruptive. If you think you know what's going to happen, you're wrong. Right? That's the only thing I could say is that whatever does happen is probably not what anyone today thinks is going to happen.
Right.
But it's not inevitable, and it's going to depend on the choices we make now going forward, collectively, individually. So my advice to you as a student, will it help or hurt? Yes, it'll do both, depending on how you use it. I agree with what's been said. Yeah, and remember back what we said previously, do a lot of different stuff. If AI does all your thinking for you and you do everything digitally, then you're narrowing your brain's scope, and it's going to atrophy in a lot of ways. So embrace the analog world every now and then. Get the frig outside, do stuff, do physical stuff. Don't spend all your time in front of screens. Don't always go to AI first. Try to do it the hard way, because that's when you're learning. Doing it the hard way is how you learn, and then it becomes easier to use it later as a tool, right? So always ask yourself the question: am I using AI as a tool to do better, or am I letting it do my work for me? And if it's the second part, you're just robbing yourself of an education. And
Yeah.
Okay.
And also to remember that this word intelligence is a marketing tool. From the point of view of neuroscience, and I think we may all agree here, we still do not know conclusively what human consciousness or intelligence is. And so just keep that in mind, because it can be very disempowering thinking that this super intelligence is going to be given birth to, that's going to just supersede us all. It's a marketing tool.
Okay, so I'm going to end at this point, and I'd like to thank my panel, Gertie, Steve, and Sarah. Thank you so much.